Welcome to What is Charging as a Service webinar hosted by the Mobility House. I'm Samantha Shive, the event manager at the Mobility House. And before we start, I'm going to go over a few settings. If you have your language setting in the wrong language or you'd like to change it, you can select the initials icon in the upper right corner and select language in the drop-down. If your setting is in German, you would select Sprache and then select your preferred language. And then we also have question mode on during the webinar. If you have a question, you can type it in chat with a question mark at the end, and it will be marked as a question to be answered later. You can also mark a chat message as a question by right-clicking the message after you send it. I'm excited to introduce our topic and our presenters for today's webinar. During this webinar, we'll be discussing charging as a service, which is becoming an increasingly popular solution for fleet operators looking to transition to electric vehicles. As you know, making this transition can be complex and expensive, which is why many fleet operators are turning to turnkey EV charging solutions like CaaS. Our presentation will cover the basic elements of charging systems, what you can expect from a CaaS solution, and we'll also address some of the common misconceptions about CaaS and guide you into choosing the right CaaS provider for your fleet. Our presenters for today are Brian Thomas, who leads business model innovation, and Elizabeth Hughes, a sales engineer at the Mobility House. Brian heads the effort to develop and test new business models and address fleets' financial and operational hurdles as they electrify. Elizabeth is focused on helping customers understand our products and unique advantages and creating an understanding regarding how they solve challenges. Thank you again for joining us.
Thanks, Sam. Hi, everybody. I'm Brian Thomas. Before we dive in, let me give you a quick introduction to the Mobility House. As the most experienced fleet charging company worldwide, our team of over 300 employees serves customers in more than 11 countries, focusing on 4 key areas. We're most well known for Charge Pilot, the world's leading fleet charging and energy management platform, designed directly to help fleets charge vehicles reliably, efficiently, and at the lowest cost. Our expertise extends to vehicle-grade integration, where we showcase how today's EVs can provide backup power or stabilize the grid. And in the same vein, we're pioneers in Second Life EV stationary battery storage in Europe, where we demonstrate the long-term value of today's EV batteries in other uses. Finally, for fleets that wanted to hand off the management of charging infrastructure to someone else, we offer turnkey solutions like charging as a service. In our 13-year history, we've collected investors and partners such as Daimler, Renault, Nissan, New Flyer Buses, Mitsui, and New York MTA. All right, in this 30-minute presentation, we'll be discussing the basics of a fleet EV charging system, defining charging as a service, addressing common misconceptions of charging as a service, and guiding you on how to choose the right charging as a service provider. We'll have a 15-minute Q&A session at the end, so please feel free to submit your questions throughout the presentation. Now, why don't we stop for a second and have one of our first audience participation surveys. What inspired your interest in this webinar today? Give everybody a few more seconds here to vote. Cool. Looks like there's a wide variety of answers. All right. And why don't we jump back into the presentation? I'm going to hand this off to my colleague, Elizabeth.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. First, let's start out understanding the elements of a fleet charging system. There are 5 main elements we're going to talk about today. The first is the chargers. These are the physical devices that bring power from the grid to your vehicles. The second component we're going to talk about today is your energy supply. It's important that you have enough power on site to meet your vehicle's needs. The third is a charging energy management system, also called a charge management system or a fueling management system. These systems are types of software that control where the electrons go and also handle the data and error reporting of your fleet. We can also think about the vehicles and the depots that support these vehicles as an aspect of your fleet charging system. And finally, we're going to cover the operations of your fleet charging system, as this is also a key component of your system. Now, all five of these components come with some challenges, and we can think about these challenges in three main ways. The first is your infrastructure planning, making sure that you purchase and select the right infrastructure for your needs. The second is the ongoing operations of your fleet and your infrastructure, basically how your day to day will work once you procure these things. And finally, your cost constraints. You have to be aware of both your upfront costs or your capital expenditures, but also your ongoing costs, also called your operational expenditures. Let's do a deep dive into first your charger and equipment challenges. There are multiple different types of chargers. There are plug-in chargers, which are the ones with the cord, but there are also pantograph or overhead chargers. These are generally more powerful. There are generally two types of power to choose from when picking out chargers. There's AC power, which is cheaper, has less power, but also has less data reporting functionality. When thinking about vehicle compatibility, it's important to make sure that the charger cable can reach the port on the vehicle and that when it is plugged in, the right current and voltage is flowing to your vehicle. If the charger's power requirements don't match the vehicle will not charge correctly. Finally, you want to make sure that your plug and your port type match, as you can't fit a square peg into a round hole. Under the broad category of charger specifications, I'm going to point out two main things you want to think about. First, the charging rate, which is often measured in kilowatts, but also you want to think about how your chargers are going to communicate with your charging and energy management system. You want to look for open industry standard protocols like OCPP. Moving on to our energy supply, you're mainly going to want to start with talking with your utility and your permitting authority. That's because your regulations that are going to affect your site are going to change by location and even your utility. Um, Other things that can affect these conversations would be if you're considering any advanced applications like vehicle to grid, where you take energy from the vehicle's battery and send it back to the grid, or automated load management, which is where you use software to control the load on your site. Both of these involve more regulatory hurdles you have to go through. If you're thinking about supplying your fleet with green energy and you want to do that through on-site power, it's important to incorporate that into the design very early on. You can also look at power purchasing agreements if you want to procure that energy instead. Thinking about your utility rate structures can be an important aspect in managing the cost of your operations. And utility rate structures vary widely across the country. But in general, if you have an unmanaged power supply, you're going to have an unmanageable bill at the end of the month. Also, your utility might provide you unique rates that can lower your average cost of energy. If you have a large enough fleet, that's considered crucial. Moving on to our charging and energy management challenges, you want to think about the integration ecosystem that this software will live in. It's important to ask yourself if the software can communicate with the chargers you're buying. It's important that it can work with the other software you have on site, such as an asset management platform or a scheduling system. And also, if you're considering a microgrid, you want it to be able to communicate with that as well. Various charging and energy management systems have different levels of sophistication. The most basic ones have static optimization, where they might say start with charging vehicle one up to 100% and go down the line of vehicles. But you might need more than that as a fleet operator. You might need a charging and energy management system that is able to do live optimization, say based on your vehicle's scheduled departure time or their current state of charge. Also, it's important to look at the data and error reporting functionality of your charging energy management systems, as access to this data is crucial when you want to troubleshoot your anything that could possibly go wrong with your chargers. Finally, thinking about reliability and future proofing, it's important to ask, do I trust my system to work now? What happens during an internet outage? And do I trust my system to work for me in the future? Things to think about here is scaling as your fleet grows, but also how will the CaaS provider handle technology as it advances? When thinking about our different vehicle challenges, the first thing to remember is that vehicles have different battery sizes and different ranges, but they also have different other advanced capabilities. Some vehicles are capable of doing what's called preconditioning, which is where you leave your vehicle plugged in and it either turns on the AC or the heat to bring it up to a correct temperature. This extends the range of your vehicle. Other vehicles can do VGI, which is vehicle to something else, and can do things like vehicle to grid or vehicle to battery or vehicle to building. Excuse me. Finally, thinking about your depot layout, it's important to remember your vehicle to charger ratio. The closer that is to 1 to 1, one vehicle for every one charger, the easier it will be for you to operate and charge your vehicles. You won't have to move them in and out so much. Also, you can exceed this ratio, meaning having more chargers than vehicles, if you want to ensure always being able to have an open charger. Speaking of moving vehicles in and out, it's important to think about how the vehicles will move through the depot, as I've seen sometimes vehicles can get trapped between two chargers. Finally, with your depot layout, it's important to remember the power requirements that you have on site. Are you on a shared meter? Is there a building load that's going to go on the same grid interconnection as your chargers? How much power is available on that grid interconnection, and will I need a utility upgrade? It's important to know this because the size of the necessary utility grid upgrade will greatly increase your costs and your lead time of your project. Finally, we want to be aware of any maintenance and operational challenges a site may have, right? You can have planned maintenance, so your hardware will need ongoing regular maintenance as per the EVSE supplier, but also there are various parts of the system that need and require software updates, and it's important that these also get done in a timely manner. When thinking about unplanned maintenance, it's important to think about the troubleshooting techniques and data that you have on hand. This is harkening back to the charging and energy management conversation because the more data you have access to, the faster it will be to troubleshoot anything that goes wrong. And finally, there's a lot of good design practices that can be incorporated into a fleet charging system, such as cable management, which will increase the life of your chargers. But you can also think about backup equipment like backup vehicles or chargers. Now that I've covered some of the operational challenges and other fleet-based challenges, I want to hear from you guys on what you think your primary concern is. All right, we're getting in some good votes. I'll give it a few more seconds and then I'll close this poll and we can move on. Awesome. So now that we've gotten our survey results and you guys have entered in what you think your primary concerns are, Brian's going to talk to you guys about what is charging as a service.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. Now that we've discussed the key components of a EV fleet charging system and the challenges involved, let's explore how charging as a service, or CaaS, helps fleet operators overcome those challenges with a holistic turnkey charging solution. Charging as a service is an end-to-end solution encompassing all aspects of the charging process, starting from initial planning and implementation through to ongoing operation. CaaS providers manage the engineering, installation, and operation of all the necessary charging equipment at your depot, streamlining the entire charging infrastructure deployment and management process. And so a CaaS solution simplifies the management of your charging system by taking care of managing the daily charging of your fleet, doing things like avoiding high energy costs, optimizing charging schedules, performing regular maintenance of the infrastructure, and performing urgent repairs to ensure that everything operates reliably. This allows you to concentrate on your core fleet operations while virtually eliminating concerns about the complexity of fleet charging operations. CaaS solutions also typically offer a flexible approach to pricing with no or low upfront costs and a variety of pricing models, including usage-based fees to accommodate diverse budgetary and operational needs. This usage-based fee structure is similar to traditional fueling, eliminating the need for fleet operators to find capital for charging infrastructure or struggling to fit it into their existing budget. And so with a clear understanding of how charging as a service can address the challenges of fleet electrification, let's discuss some common misconceptions about charging as a service. Probably the most common misconception I hear is CaaS isn't compatible with grants. In reality, many grants can be applied to CaaS solutions, lowering the overall cost and making them even more affordable with lower usage-based fees. We also often hear that CaaS isn't expandable or CaaS service can't adapt to my changing fleet needs. Well, the opposite is true. CaaS solution providers are your partner and design a solution that can grow and evolve with fleet size and technology needs. We also sometimes hear people express concerns like, CaaS doesn't include vehicles or depots. And it's true, while some providers may not include these components, others can provide vehicle financing and can provide dedicated charging depots from scratch. Another common misconception we often hear is that CaaS has no effect on fleet operations. It only helps with installation. So as we've discussed, the opposite is actually true. CaaS simplifies and streamlines the operations and management of your EV charging infrastructure. Many fleet operators also believe that they should wait to look into CaaS solutions until they know all of their electrification plans. But in reality, it's actually better to explore CaaS options early in your electrification planning process, as this can help you make more informed decisions about your electrification plans and ultimately the approach you decide to take. And finally, and this is definitely the most common misconception about charging as a service, is that CaaS is the same from all providers. And the reality is that different providers offer different features, capabilities, and pricing structures. And on that note, let's talk about what leading providers deliver as compared to others. And so a top-tier charging as a service provider offers a range of features and benefits that set them apart from the competition. And ultimately, by delivering customized solutions, they are flexible and future-proof. These providers ensure a seamless and successful EV charging experience for your fleet. What you want to look out for in terms of approaches from providers is that they provide a customized and validated design, because by conducting simulations, leading providers can validate their designs, support your fleet's daily schedule and duty cycle. They also develop customized designs based on your fleet's operational needs and depot layout, utilizing data-driven insights to optimize the charging infrastructure. Leading providers also offer multiple pricing options to accommodate various fleet sizes, contract lengths, and even provide buyout options. And they are all also ensure transparency by including details of grants, rebates, credits, and other levers that go into actually calculating your price. And that's included in any proposal or charging agreement that you get from one of those leading providers. Top-tier CaaS providers also offer comprehensive services that include data-backed uptime guarantees, advanced charging and energy management systems with automated load management or ALM capabilities, as well as experience in vehicle grid integration technologies like Elizabeth talked about earlier. They also provide a comprehensive support plan and training for the charging system for fleet operators to ensure that long-term success and understanding of everybody involved in minimizing disruptions and ensuring that the fleet remains operational at all times. And then finally, the best charging as a service providers design solutions that can be easily expanded or adapted as your fleet needs evolve, ensuring you're prepared for the future. And so now that you're thinking about what makes leading providers stand out, we also want to keep an eye out for CaaS provider red flags. Probably the most common red flag is cookie cutter system design's approach. And so you want to really avoid providers that take one size fits all approach to charging infrastructure design, as this may not cater to your fleet's specific requirements, and it's very tempting to take that approach by many providers. You also want to steer clear of providers whose solutions cannot be easily expanded or adapted to accommodate your fleet's future needs. In reality, your charging needs will evolve over time as you bring on more vehicles, and this should be part of any CaaS provider's proposal. You also want to be cautious of providers who don't offer a comprehensive charging energy management system or simply rely on low-level management solutions, as this is going to limit your ability to optimize charging processes and will most often be reflected in the price that they provide to fleet operators. And then finally, you want to look out for CaaS providers that don't provide any buyout option. You want to consider whether they offer those buyout options, as this can provide you as a fleet operator greater flexibility for your fleet in the long run if your needs or your physical operating location changes. And so with these topics in mind, avoiding identified red flags and looking for the top tier characteristics to help you ensure a successful installation and operation of electric vehicle charging infrastructure for your fleet. Let's switch to our third survey here and tell us what you are looking for in a CaaS offering. Great, we'll give us a few more seconds for people to respond. Okay. Looks like most of you are looking to avoid upfront costs for charging infrastructure. And there's a wide variety of other answers here. Very good. With that, I will hand it back over to my colleague, Elizabeth.
Awesome. Okay, now that we've thought about some red flags, it's time to ask the tough questions to make sure we're selecting a CaaS provider that doesn't fit into any of those red flags. And so I have some questions up on the screen here, but really these 4 questions hover around 4 main topics you want to ask questions about and get comfortable with. The first is experience. You want to make sure that you ask your CaaS provider about their experience and that they have experience working with hundreds of fleets. The second is you want to make sure that they're going to offer you some sort of cost reduction and that they can prove this cost reduction will happen. The third is that you want to make sure that your CaaS provider is going to help you maintain your resiliency and your reliability. Ask them, what type of support packages they have and if they provide any uptime guarantees. And finally, you want to ask your CaaS provider how they know that their design will work for your fleet. Look for answers that say they've done analysis and simulation, and of course, they can back them up through experiences. That is the end of our webinar, but we want to thank you for your time, and we wanted to give you these resources as well so that you can continue learning about us at the Mobility House, but also CaaS in general, and maybe think about how you're going to electrify your fleet in the future. We're going to now open it up for our Q&A section.
All right. Thanks, Elizabeth. Does anybody have any questions for us today? Feel free to drop them into the question section of the interface there.
All right, Brian, I see that Dylan has a question in the chat.
Yeah, why don't you take that one, Elizabeth?
Sure. Charging energy management does reduce the cost of charging because it helps you control for your utility rate structures. Without having a software system in place, you can get hit by what's called a peak demand charge. These generally can make up to 70 to 80% of your bill. And so it's important that you always have a system in place to make sure that you never have to pay these peak demand charges.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions? Well, we're happy to hang out here for a little bit and give people a chance to ask a question in the Q&A section of the interface, or feel free to also unmute your mic and ask away, analog style. Okay, Elizabeth, I guess we did a good job of answering everybody's questions.
Yeah, and I think, if anyone thinks of any questions later on, they can always, email either of us, or they can set up a meeting with us.
So there's a link at the top of your screen there with the option to schedule a meeting with us to talk about charging as a service. It'll take you to a Calendly page. And of course, you can always reach the Mobility House in general, us-sales@mobilityhouse.com. Our contact information there is on screen.